So yes, hello everyone, how are you doing today? I hope you're having a fantastic day and been having a pretty good life in the last couple weeks. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Jojo's Bizarre Adventure parts 1 through 5, everything that's been released for the series physically. I finished it, I read it all, and I'm ready to give my thoughts and opinions on each individual part. So let's start off with part 1, Phantom Blood. Now, this is the shortest part of the JoJo series. Obviously, there are only 3 volumes in these beautiful hardcovers. Now, this story, I'd say, is a good starting point. It's a good beginning part for JoJo's. If you've never read JoJo's, I think this is the perfect place to start off because you kind of get a sense of the weirdness of the world, as well as the beauty of the characters and things of that sort. The art, of course, is always gorgeous when it comes to JoJo's. Like, who doesn't love this stuff? I mean, it's just gorgeous. Out of all 5 parts, I would say JoJo's part 1 is easily the most mid. I would say out of 10, this is probably a solid 5. It's okay. It's good. Well, you know what? I'll even bump it up. It's a 6. It's a 6. One thing that I had a negative opinion on in regards to this series was the fact, or this one part in particular, is that the main character, I believe his name is Jonathan Joestar, he is just too much of goody-goody two-shoes. So I got to a point where I was kind of like annoyed at it. But then I was like, you know what? This is the first part. I'm not going to get too mad about it. So out of 10, definitely 6, part 1. As for part 2, I would definitely say it definitely improved upon part 1. This, of course, has 1 extra volume in these beautiful hardcovers compared to part 1. This one has 4 volumes instead of just 3. I really also like the contrast between Joseph Joestar and Jonathan, whereas Jonathan was a lot more of the chivalrous knight. Joseph just doesn't give 2 Fs, which I love about him. He's a very much so a punk kid. So I really like that about him as well. Out of 10, I would definitely give part 2 a solid 7. I think that it definitely improved a lot on what part 1 set up. And for that, I am very, very thankful. And I'm really glad. Also, I've heard a lot of people say that you can read JoJo's or the individual parts separately. You don't have to read them like from beginning to end. Highly disagree. There are things in here, just slight things, but still core things in the story and elements of every individual part that have consequences from past parts. So I definitely would not agree with that sentimentality in regards to you don't have to read every JoJo part in order. I definitely think you should. So as I said, part 2, I would give it a solid 7 out of 10. Now for probably the most controversial part, and that is part 3. You might be wondering, what do you mean by controversial? Well, this is a very famous part. Stardust Crusaders, one of the most popular, probably the most popular part in all of JoJo's. I got a problem with it, and I'll tell you. I guess maybe it's the anime that's popular. Maybe. This was the longest part for me to get through. Or to read. It felt like, if you know what I'm talking about, you'll know, but it felt like I was reading the novelization of a Tekken game. Like, it just felt like, you go to some exotic location, you fight a big bad, you learn how to defeat him, and then, you know, then you're done. You move on to next exotic location. There's not much character building or anything like that. Jotaro's kind of a one-note character in this part. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to give Stardust Crusaders the manga. I'm not sure about the anime. I'm sure the anime is probably better. But the manga, I got to give it a solid 5 out of 10. It's lower than part 1 in my opinion. At least with part 1, I really like the story. Here, there's not much story. It's just, you're just listening or reading how they fight these certain characters. It wasn't until volumes 9 and 10 that this story, in my opinion, got really good. And I actually binged volume 9 and 10 pretty close together. So yeah, unfortunately, Stardust Crusaders, one of the most popular, if not the most popular part of JoJo's. I have to give it a mid-tier 5 out of 10. Next up, we have probably the second most popular JoJo's part. Part 4 Diamond is Unbreakable with my boy Josuke. Yeah, this is hands down my favorite part so far. I have obviously heard that part 6 is probably even better than this, but in my personal opinion, right now, of what I've read from parts 1 through what's been released to 5, this is my favorite part. Part 4 is amazing. It's hands down one of the best manga reading experiences I've ever had. I binged read this series. I love the characters. I love the world. Like, I want to get figurines of every single one of these characters in here. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 stories, because, you know, they'll have chapters, and the chapters will be grouped like part 1, part 2, part 3 of this one certain story. I think there was maybe 2 stories that I didn't care for, just kind of fun and bland, and they overall didn't play a big role later on. But the rest of it is just this 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10. It's just like, it's nearly flawless. I'd give this a solid 9.5 out of 10. It's super, I will probably pick this up and read it just on its own. And my boy, Rohan Kishibe, love him. I can totally see the hype now. And then lastly, we have part 5, Golden Wind. This is everything that's been released physically is part 5. Volume 7, I believe, and Volume 8 is coming out soon. This is definitely an extreme decrease in quality after part 4, in my opinion. I like the character of Giorno, and what's really sad is the fact that you don't really get to focus much on him until the later volumes. Like, you get introduced to him, and then for like a solid 3 volumes, they move off onto other characters. And at first it's annoying, because in my opinion, I didn't really care for them. But later on, throughout 5 and 6 and 7, you realize that you grow to really care for those characters. So it's kind of interesting. It's like, I want to learn more about him. I want to learn more about Giorno. And I'm learning about all these other side characters. Well, then later on, when I finally focus on Giorno, you have that care, even if you didn't realize you did, but you do care for these side characters. And when they're getting hurt or in trouble, you do start to feel things for them. So, as unorthodox as it is to tell the story in that way, I can't deny that it definitely had me hooked near the end of this series. I'm really excited to finish part 5, to see how it ends, because it's definitely an interesting story in comparison to the others. I like how the genres are very different. So, as for right now, because it's not obviously completed physically, and therefore I have not read it completely, I would say part 5 is probably on the level slightly above part 2. Just slightly. So maybe a 7.25 or something like that. 7.5, 7.25. Definitely a decrease from part 4, but slightly better than part 2, in my opinion. And that's Golden Wind. So that is everything for the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure review. It's definitely weird, it's definitely wacky, but it is a definite must-read, and I can't wait to get into the other unpublished parts whenever they become physically available.